really evolved over time. It used to be that there was a piece of media, and the thing that you would do with it is you consumed it, right? And that's what you did with a piece of content. And so when you share content, it sometimes becomes something else. Sometimes content is about identity. So this is a post called 27 Signs You're Raised by Asian Immigrant Parents. I actually wrote this post, so I'm very proud of it. This is, so on the left is, this is how some people take photos, and then on the right is like how your parents take photos on vacation. And then this is what your parents do in the fruit aisle of the grocery store. And when you share, like I might share this because I might say, oh, this is so me, right? This is something that I want people to understand about me, that it's hard for me to explain, like what it was like growing up with my family. Or maybe my husband will share it with me and say, this is so you and your family. Like, I can't believe this. It's actually totally encapsulate what it's like to hang out with your family. And it's a very different thing. It's almost like content has become a proxy for conversation. And media has become a proxy for conversation. And this has been happening for a long time. I mean, how many people here use emoji? Sometimes an emoji will convey the exact feeling that you want to convey better than paragraphs of text. And then if you think about primetime television is content that network has decided to produce, and its goal is to create content that about 80% of people think is okay, right? But for the social web, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create content. Less than 10% of Americans are Asian, or of Asian descent. So we're trying to create content where less than 10% of people find so compelling and so personal that they are moved to share it with their friends. That's a little bit of the difference between how we think about content for the social web and content that came before it. The other thing about content being shared is that it's to share an emotion. So when you share content that you find funny or inspiring, or you feel rejuvenated or relieved or what have you, you're sharing it so that you can share that emotion with your friends. And that makes you feel closer with your friends. It's become a form of communication. I think that, Tony was talking about restoring your faith in humanity. This kind of content we find is particularly interesting because we see that this kind of content resurfaces after a tragedy. And people are using it as a tool to talk to other people about how, maybe humanity isn't, so terrible after all. A few years ago, there was an earthquake in New York. How many people were here for that? So you may remember, everyone was freaking out. It was Armageddon. And it turned out that basically, there was no damage. There was no damage in New York. And so about an hour after that happened, we published a story about the 26 horrific things that happened, damages that happened after the earthquake. And this was one of the terrible things that happened. The yogurt pan fell over. And so when you publish into the zeitgeist, it's a concept that people are sharing because everyone is talking about something that just happened, and this kind of content expresses how you feel also, because oh wow, everyone was freaking out, and actually the worst thing that happened was your picture was slightly askew, and your yogurt cup fell over. And so that's content is also shared. The other thing that happened a couple of years ago is that the social networks really started to evolve. So Facebook used to be a place where you would post pictures of your drunk friends, right, the night before. Twitter was a place where you would tweet about what you had for breakfast. But then people really started using these platforms to share news content. And this is, when we saw this trend happening, this is when Jonah hired Ben Smith to become our editor-in-chief to build up our news coverage. We said, wow, people are beginning to really share news content on these social platforms. We need to be there as well. We weren't creating any news content in 2010. And so, or 2011. And so now people are sharing a lot of content on Facebook. Facebook is one of the largest places where young people discover news today. And so we have poured a lot of effort and time and money. We have, just in our BuzzFeed News operation, we have over 100 news reporters in 20 countries. We have 10 investigative reporters led by Mark Schutz, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the Wall Street Journal and ProPublica. In our staff, we have two, in addition to Mark, we have Chris Hamby, another Pulitzer Prize winner, and then someone else who won a Pulitzer nomination. And some of these, and we have reporters in Turkey, covering Syria, in Liberia, in Ukraine, as well as journalists in the U.S. Or based in the U.S. and then like covering thematic issues worldwide. One other myth about what gets shared on the web is that it has to be short things or lots of pictures. And what we found is that when you publish for the web, and probably the people here at Spectator know this as well, is that you're not limited to your any sort of like print constraint where you have to fill in this many inches or you can't go over, and you also aren't limited to the constraint of who your subscribers currently are, because you're writing for the internet and not writing for the publication, is how we think about it. And so stories at BuzzFeed, whether it be a list of things that, signs that you were raised by immigrant parents, or whether it's a story with more traditional, like paragraphs of text, they're as long as they should be. They're no longer and they're no shorter. If it's too long, it's because basically you cut it and it gets boring. Or like, not interesting. And so there have been many long-form stories on BuzzFeed that have been shared very, very well. This is an example of a 6,000-word story about a kid, or can really say a kid, who's like a recent college grad who bought a house for Detroit and fixed it up. And it was shared a lot. It was read on mobile, but for the average time spent on mobile was actually even longer than on desktop, because that's where a lot of people were discovering the content on their social feeds. So basically, if someone shares with you a story, so you have to read this story about this kid who bought a house in Detroit, it's amazing. Even if you're on your phone, you're going to read it because your friend just said it was great, and in fact, the story is great as evidence by the fact that it was shared a ton. And so it's just an example of how it's not about the length of the piece of content that matters. It's about how it was written, what the angle is. Everything that you guys learn about in journalism school, it matters, and for us it matters even more because the bar that we are setting is just extremely high. It's like, will someone find the story so revelatory, so amazing, so touching that they'll want to share it. BuzzFeed Life is also part of our editorial team. Does anyone know what the screenshot is from? Pinterest, that's right, Pinterest. Pinterest is, I don't need to tell you what it is, but Pinterest is a huge part of our BuzzFeed Life strategy. It's basically service journalism for the social web. And we cover all kinds of topics that are covered, by, New York Times, Time.com, like lots of traditional stories, food, DIY, parenting, like travel, more. Pinterest is our number 2 social referrer, ahead of Twitter, like way ahead of Twitter. And it's a way of delivering service journalism that is geared for the social web. So BuzzFeed Motion Pictures is our video department. Like I said, we have like 500 million monthly video views, which is like insane. Even when I talk about it, it's insane. I can't even believe it. But we are taking the same kinds of things that we learned about what makes content shareable and post and applying them to videos. We have a 24,000 square foot studio space in LA. We have 50 people who work in the video department, and it's you know, they are thinking about like who's going to share this video. Once again, it's not necessarily about like oh, you just consume it. It's, you know, is it about identity? Is it about sharing emotion? Is it about conveying some sort of like information that is captured really well by video? So I have 3 videos here, just examples of some of our more popular videos. And I'm going to play one of them, and then you guys are going to vote which one you want to see. So who wants to see things Disney characters do that would be creepy if you did them? Okay, who wants to see If Women Cat Called Men? How many want to see Weird Thing About Couples Fight About? I think it's If Women Cat Called Men. Did you see that's the winner?
Yeah.
All right, so visualize that video. Wait, how do I turn that?
Hey, you look like you love commitment. Sure, sweetie. Bet it's a good heart. Bet those arms can put together my IKEA furniture. Talk to me, sweetie. You want a family?
Hey, baby. Hey, baby. I bet you let me choose what to do with my whole body.
Oh, your foot looks so good on my couch. Do you watch reality TV? How are your foot rubs?
I bet you can handle a girl with all kinds of emotions.
Hey, baby. You hear me? You hear me? Yeah, because you're a good listener.
You are so emotionally stable.
You're some babies. You look like a real mess. Let me fix you. I bet you would treat me with respect.
Ooh, darling. You look monogamous.
Hey, nice show you a spoon. Ooh, you touch your mom with that mouth? Or at all? The good relationship with your mother's important.
Beard match the carpet.
Damn, you're cute.
Hey, you want to go back to my place? We can eat pizza. We can hold each other all night.
Hey, quick question. How do you feel about that in your jeans, though?
Wow.
So this, you know, like basically, like if you're a woman, you've ever been catcalled, it's basically like everybody. Like this sums up so much about how you feel about a lot of things. And so you would, you know, you might want to share this with your friends if you were to come across it. A really big shift has happened in just a decade. I know that everyone was talking about how search is still a big deal, and search is a big deal for us too. It's still growing. It's not growing as fast as social, if you can believe it, even for us. And for us, search, a lot of search. Maybe I think we're also just kind of bad at search. But search, a lot of it just comes into our homepage, right? So people are like literally searching BuzzFeed, like just type it in your phone. And so for us, the new distribution channels are really social, and social has converged with mobile. This is how a lot of people, especially young people in our demographic, which is 1834, are discovering news, discovering content, is through Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I'll probably need to belabor this point. So sharing is important to us. It's also really hard to measure. I know this is about data, so might run out of time. Okay, so it's really hard to measure, and so we're trying to measure it, and we're trying different ways to measure it. One of the ways we're measuring it right now is something that we call social lift. So this is a recent snapshot of our real-time dashboard. And you can see the most important number is probably the one in red, right? It's social lift. This is for all of BuzzFeed. And then every post and author has a similar dashboard with social lift and social views, so you see views and photo views. So what is social lift? It's not that hard to understand, but it's something that I have to explain all the time, even within BuzzFeed, so many new people come in. Social lift is basically how much extra traffic you're getting from outside of BuzzFeed. So if you have 100 page views from people recirculating on the site, and then 100 page views from social and links and other places, then you have 200 page views total, you have a 2x social lift, which means that you've doubled your page views because of sharing and outside traffic. So why is social lift important? And it's important for us because it aligns with our mission, like Tony was saying, right? Your mission and your metrics will align. For us, sharing is so important. It's the highest bar of engagement, and social lift is one way of measuring sharing. So let's say you have an article about funny autocorrects, okay? And it got 200,000 page views, which is not that much for a post about autocorrects. And let's say it had a 1.2 social lift, which means it only got a 20% lift in extra page views because of sharing. And let's say you had another article about some obscure bill in Congress that also got 200,000 page views, but got a 2x social lift, which means that it doubled its page views because of sharing. So for us, the post about the politics post is actually a much better post. It's objectively a better post. It was shared much more, and you can measure that by view of its social lift. And it's because probably a very much smaller number of people are interested in this bill, but you've reached more of them than your post about autocorrects that only got a 1.2x social lift. And so when we think about content, in a way, I agree with a lot of things that Tony says, is that your piece of content is competing against every other piece of content in the internet, posted by your friends, posted on BuzzFeed, posted on everything else. And so every piece of content is judged just by itself. By itself, is this piece of content, did it reach the audience of people who are interested in it? And the best way of getting there is through sharing. So that's why we use social lift as a metric. So one of the interesting things that I know that Tony was talking about is attention, right? So we thought it was interesting, how are sharing and time correlated exactly? And so we looked into this as well. And so if you think about this question, you can think about it in two ways. So the first way is, do we read the articles that we share? And what we did is we just looked at Facebook sharing. Facebook is, it's the biggest social network for us and in the world. So we just looked at Facebook sharing, and what we did is instead of comparing a 6,000 word article to a list of 20 GIFs, we just compared the activity of users for each story between those who shared and those who didn't. So it's a very different way than I think that Charpy has been doing its research. It's really important because, like I said before, for us, we're not comparing our list of autocorrect posts to politics stories. They're totally different. They're trying to reach audiences in a different way. Different audiences are of different size, right? Let's just be honest. There are fewer people who are interested in obscure bills in Congress and are interested in looking at funny things on the internet. So what we found is that, in fact, 68% users that share spend 68% more time on page than users who don't share the same story. Okay, and that's true on mobile, and that's true for sponsored content. Even more so for sponsored content. Sponsored content, people know that it's sponsored because it's an ad and it says it's written by, in this case, Allstate. And so there's an even higher bar to share sponsored content than there is for non-sponsored content. And then the second way you can think about that question is, do we share the articles we read? Okay, so the first one is do you read them first and then share them? How much do you do? And the second one is if the more we read, is it more likely that we'll share? So it's a good correlation. And so what we found is that, in fact, you do share the articles that you read. So this is the percent of the median time on the article on the x-axis, and the percent of overall share rate for the y-axis. And what you can see is that there's an initial bump. So there is an initial bump where there are some people who don't spend that much time on the article and then share it. But then after that, it follows the correlation, like a positive slope. And this is true on mobile and for sponsored content too. So basically, the key takeaways are, think about why people share. Like, there are no tricks. Distribution is important. For us, the best machine learning is human brain. The reason I put that in there, I've got to talk about it, but basically, like every post has that same dashboard. And what we do is editors just look at their dashboards and see, which are the posts that got the highest social lift. And then, what did I do on that story? Maybe I can learn something from how I wrote that story versus the story that got lower social lift. And they do this over and over again. We give them instant feedback, and they can experiment with different ways of approaching content. And then in the end, people read what they share, and they share what they read. And this is Nicolas Cage, his head on the